Hi, everyone. I'm Catherine Anaya. Welcome to the Women's Eye podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me. This is where you're going to be fascinating women who are leaving their mark, making a difference, and changing lives. This episode is brought to you by Casco Financial Group, located in Phoenix, Arizona. Catherine Scrivano is the president of Casco Financial Group. She started her business to help people create financial strength to achieve their dreams. My guest today is an incredibly talented singer-songwriter who's making a difference in the world by telling stories and connecting people through her music. Her many projects include creating the music for a musical now headed to an off-Broadway stage. Please welcome from Austin, Texas, Carrie Rodriguez. Carrie, it's so great to see you.
It's so good to see you, Catherine. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you. You've been up to so much since I last talked to you, which was, I guess it was 2 years ago, shortly after the pandemic hit. How have you been? I mean, incredibly busy to say the least, right?
I have been very busy, and I'm very grateful for that because, as we all know, at the beginning of the pandemic, we could not be busy. So it's been an interesting journey. I actually, looking back at the last 2 years, I think that when the pandemic hit, first of all, my family was very fortunate and we were able to stay healthy. But I think the slowdown did allow me to spend some really much needed time with our son to kind of just reset moving forward, like my goals and how I want to, kind of keep going with life. And it's so hard when we get wrapped up in all the different things we do. It's really hard to just stop and think about, well, what do I really want to be doing?
Well, I think a lot of us were able to take that time to really put things into perspective. But I love the fact that during that time, you still found ways to connect to people through your music because you were videotaping kind of like concerts at your house.
Yes, and I am extremely fortunate to have a husband who not only is a wonderful musician and very good looking,
Yes,
but also he's a great videographer, and that's also what he does for a living. He shoots video and small kind of documentaries and commercial work. So we were very lucky that we could continue to capture music and share it with our fans all over the world when it wasn't safe to get out and do that in a live setting. So yeah, one of the first things we started after, I think probably in March of 2020, was a video series called Song for You. And of course we're stuck at home with our then 4-year-old son, Cruz, and it was really a family affair. He would help us shoot a video. Our son would. He would be behind the camera, like pressing, start. But we'd shoot a video of ourselves playing a song that, just every week it would be like, what is inspiring us? What song do we want to put out there for people? What do we feel like might help people? What's helping us? So it was a really sweet way to stay connected and feel like we were still able to give. And our fans gave back too. That was another thing. I mean, people really supported us during that time and were sending in, donations for these videos that we were putting in.
I love that.
Yeah, beautiful.
Music just has a way of unifying people in so many different ways at so many different times and points in their lives. So I commend you for continuing to share that with the world during what was a very difficult time for a lot of us. And congratulations on all the music, the beautiful music you continue to make. I do want to talk about something that is close to home here in Phoenix, Arizona, where I am. And that's because there is this fabulous musical that happened shortly before we talked a couple of years ago. It's called Americano the Musical, and some really fantastic news has come since then, and that is that musical is officially opening off Broadway in April for a 12-week run off Broadway, and you wrote all of the music. I mean, I get chills just thinking about it because I remember when we talked a couple of years ago, you said, I never in a million years thought I would be the composer or lyricist for a musical. And now here we are. You're about to take it to off-Broadway. So tell me about that journey and getting that to the global stage and how it feels to have that finally happen.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I never would have imagined, honestly, that we would get this far already. I mean, I see that as such a huge success right there. Um, but yes, this was also unexpected. It's just one of those things in life where you get an opportunity and you have no idea how you're going to do it, but there's no way you can say no. That's what it was like when the producer and the book writers of Americano came to me. You know, they told me the story of Tony Valdovinos, who this musical is based on, and I was so moved by his story that there was no way I could say no, even though I know nothing about musical theater, frankly. I mean, I'd only seen a few before I started writing for the musical.
Which is incredible.
Yeah, so it's really just been such a huge learning curve for me in all aspects, and the writing and just learning about the theater in general, how it works. Everything that goes into it. I mean, there's so much behind the scenes going into putting on a production like this.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have so much respect for every single person who's a part of it. Our run in Phoenix was very successful. That was incredible to see. I mean, the last 10 shows were sold out. And there were so many people that made that possible. But then following that, so many people have jumped on this train to hold us up and support us and allow us to bring this to New York City, which is essentially to the world.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, one of our biggest supporters is Chicanos por la Causa.
Yes.
Which are a Phoenix-based organization, and they have been around since the 60s, lifting up Latinos, lifting up our community, helping us achieve goals.
Yes.
And I'm just so honored to be, you know, involved in a project that is, you know, now with them and going to be shared with the world.
Well, I'm just so proud to have been able to see it when it was here in Phoenix, to have been inspired and moved by it, and to talk to you about your involvement in it. As you mentioned, it is the true story of Tony Valdovinos, an Arizona dreamer who learned that he was undocumented when he turned 18 and tried to join the Marines. Also, it had that wildly successful run here in Phoenix, where, as you mentioned, it broke box office records. That music is so unique. It's so powerful. It's so moving. I remember that was the first thing that everybody talked about as they were leaving, is that music was just so wow. How would you describe, for people who have yet to see it, to hear it, that sound?
I do think it's very Arizona Mex. I feel like we achieved something that's very authentically Arizona and Mexican. And a big part of that is our musical arranger. His name is Sergio Mendoza, and he has a band called Orquesta Mendoza, very successful Arizona-based band. He's in Mexico, who plays on world stages. He's just a wonderful, wonderful musician and arranger. And I feel like he brought my songs, which were, you know, full of art, but probably more folk-based, because I'm a folk singer-songwriter and I'm writing stories. And I feel like he took those folk songs and turned them into these uplifting party songs. They're still telling the story, but in such a fun way. You just can't help but, you know, shake your butt in the seat.
It's very joyous.
Very, yeah. So, and it's really cool too that I feel like we're representing a lot of different styles of Mexican and Latin music in general. It's just really fun to be representing that in a musical, because I don't feel like that's ever been done before.
Well, I certainly had never seen anything like it. And, you know, when I think about music and songwriting, because I come from a very strong musical background. My mother was a professional singer. So I grew up really, you know, just bonding with music. I'm always fascinated by the process that goes into writing even one song. But for Americano, you spent several years writing dozens of songs for this musical. Had you ever written for a musical or in that sort of context before, and how challenging was that to have that opportunity and yet not really having that background?
Yeah, it was a huge challenge. And honestly, there were moments in that process where I would question everything and say, why was I chosen to do this? Should I have been chosen? Am I capable of doing this? You know, I would run up against walls, because my whole life I've written songs when I'm inspired to write a song. And it's generally something that's, informed by my own life experience. And, I don't have to worry about exactly. I've just never had an assignment so specific in terms of writing a song. And I'm more eager than others. But there were certainly songs where I'm writing for 4 different characters and they're all interjecting their opinions within the song. And it's like so hard for my brain to get around having to write for so many different people who think differently than I do.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I had to dig deep. And I think the hardest part really was overcoming my own self-doubt. The hardest part was just believing, okay, no, I was chosen for a reason. I have written songs that have moved people because I've gotten that feedback, and I know that's part of what I do. So I just need to believe in myself, believe that I'm able, even though I have so much to learn, believe that there's like a heart in it that is true. And I just somehow kept moving through it.
Well, you did a phenomenal job. What inspires you when you write music, not specifically for the musical, but just in general? I often think, well, sometimes when I'm writing and I get a writer's block, I'll go and I'll read or I'll listen to a podcast, and then it'll kind of get my creative juices going again. What do you do to stay inspired and motivated?
Yeah, for me, I think it's always been observing the people around me. Like I lived in New York City for 9 years, and I wrote so many of my songs during that time. Of course, were just inspired by my everyday interactions with people, witnessing things happening in front of me that really moved me. And in this case with Americano, I live in a predominantly working class Latino neighborhood, and I felt like I was writing our story. I was writing my neighborhood story.
Hmm.
I was writing the story of my neighbor on the right side of me who has to fire up his diesel truck at 4:30 in the morning, and I know because it wakes me up because it's his driveway's right next to our bedroom. But he has to go to work that early because in Texas, like in Arizona, it's 105 degrees, by 2 o'clock or whatever. So I wanted to tell his story, and how he is making it work for his family. And the people who live across the street from me, for example, their family parties on the weekends are so much fun to watch. Just like seeing the little kids, they could be 5-year-old kids and it's like midnight and they're out there with sparklers with their grandmas. That is such an important part of Mexican culture, is just being with your family and celebrating with your family. So I feel like this whole musical, was inspired by not only Tony's story, but by the story of so many Latinos that are all around me. So yeah, that was.
Well, it is a triumph, and I'm so excited. I have been invited by several people who are involved in the musical to go see it in New York, so I'm hoping to make that happen. So hopefully I'll see you there. I want to switch gears because you had the opportunity to be a part of something that's pretty awesome. Like I said, I listen to podcasts a lot, and here's a fun fact for our audience today. You composed, along with your friend and fellow musician Gina Chavez, the theme music for Brené Brown's popular podcast, Unlocking Us. I mean, first of all, she is always talking about how many people talk about the theme music and how much they love it. So now I love it even more because I know who composed it. How did all of that come about? I know she lives in Texas as well. Were you friends before?
We did know each other before. I performed at a Texas conference for women back in, I'm guessing it was 2013, 14. I can't even remember, but I performed right before the keynote speaker, who was Brené. So that's where I met her. And after the performance, and after of course, then she started speaking, and I was like crying and just ugly crying. It was so moving. And afterwards, she came up to me and said, "Carrie, I want you to be my guest on a blog series I do on the website." Back then, she would have a different artist in all genres of art, writers, musicians. She would have them answer these questions about vulnerability. It was like a questionnaire that we would, that she would have different answer. And it was very challenging to answer the questions, as you can imagine. Talking about our own vulnerability is just so hard. And so she gave me these questions, and this is kind of a long story, but I'm going to give it to you anyway. So my neighbor and dear friend at the time was a big Brené fan, and I had told her, yeah, Brené gave me this thing to answer, and I'm going to do it. And then I went on tour. Well, I flew somewhere up north, and I forgot my coat. And I call my neighbor. I'm like, Ann, can you please send me my coat in the mail? I forgot a coat. I'm going to be out here for a month, whatever. She said, did you send Brené answers to the questions yet? And I said, no, I didn't. Well, when you send them and you let me know, I'll send you your coat.
That's a good friend and neighbor.
She is a wonderful friend. So I got my act together. I answered those questions, and she put that on our website. So ever since, we've stayed in touch, and she's just been a huge supporter. And she reached out to Gina and me and asked us if we would take a shot at composing the music for her new podcast. She just decided, she really enjoys both of our styles. Music. Mm-hmm. She was curious to see if we could do something together. We had written a song together before. So this was right at the start of the pandemic. And I'm thinking, in fact, I think it was like the first week of March 2020 that we went into the studio to record the music. So we just barely got it in before everyone was having to stay home. And then more recently, I think at Austin City Limits Festival back in, when did that just happen? In October? Mm-hmm. In Austin, it's a big music festival here. Brené did a live podcast at the festival with, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget his name, actor, and it's the soccer show.
Oh, yes. Why am I blanking on it? Because I love that show. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Well, anyway, so they did a live podcast at ACL, which was wild, and it was crazy. And she had Gina and me come perform the music live before they did their podcast on a stage.
Oh, how fabulous.
Yes, it was.
What an experience. Well, and she also had you on her podcast not too long after you composed the theme music. She had you on as her guest, which was very cool. I very much enjoyed listening to it. She's such a fan, which I just think is so wonderful. And she raved about your ongoing concert series that you actually just relaunched last month after a 2-year hiatus due to the pandemic. How was it to perform that again? And then you also direct an all-star Austin-based band, right?
Yes. So the concert series Brené was going on about is called Laboratorio, which means laboratory in Spanish. And it's a series that I started in, I guess, 2016. I had just had a cruise, and I was trying to find opportunities to perform at home, because I spent so much of my time on the road leading up to that. I mean, since I was 21 up until we had cruise, I was on the road all the time. And I was just searching for more of a connection to Austin's music scene and the wonderful musicians that live here. And I also wanted to learn more about Latin music in all of its forms, not just Mexican music, but, there's so many different kinds of music that you could put in that category. And even the question, like, what is Latin music? I'm still trying to figure that out. So anyway, I started this project. It has an all-star Austin band, and I'm the band leader, musical director. And we get a different who specializes in some kind of Latin music to be our guest. And we collaborate with them. We learn some of their songs. They learn some of ours. And we perform it for a live audience. So we were doing about 3 years leading up until the pandemic. And now we just performed for the first time in 2 years in Austin. And it feels like a miracle.
Oh, I bet it does. So much has happened. And yet you still continue to keep the music out there, to keep connecting people. Like I mentioned, you continue to do it during the pandemic and bringing this back after the hiatus. I mean, you're involved in all kinds of different mediums. It's not just the music you listen to, but it's also to watch you playing the several instruments that you play and connecting people to what we talked about, which was the emotion and the passion in music and how it unifies us and brings us together. And I want to reference the video series that you launched last year on YouTube and on your website, because, on top of the music, you talk to musicians, you give us a glimpse of Texas that maybe we didn't have never experienced before. I lived in Texas for a year. And it just really opened my eyes to so many things I had never seen. It's called Texas with Love, from Texas with Love, I should say, produced and directed by your husband, Luke, the handsome husband. He did such a great job with this. It's just, like I said, this lovely blend of collaboration and music in the landscape of Texas. What made you come up with this idea? Because it really is just beautiful.
I think it really was the need for connection. It's like what you're saying. We've all been so isolated. I think we were isolated in ways before the pandemic even started. But, now, of course, we've just been so isolated from people. And we started this series because it was a safe way to be in community with another musician. So the concept is I do a duo performance collaboration with one other musician outdoors, which is always safe. But we showcase like different parts of Texas. And so far we've just been filming in the central Texas area, which is very lovely. But we have plans to hopefully get out into the further reaches of Texas, like West Texas, where there's desert and mountains. East Texas, we've got beautiful forests. So yeah, it's a musical friend, and myself having a conversation, both, with a type of an interview kind of conversation, but also in music. And I think connecting with another musician in that setting is just another way to connect to the people at home too who are watching.
Well, and you told me episodes 1 and 4, which are the ones you did with women, are your favorites. Why are they so special?
They are, well, I think there is something really sacred about playing music with someone outside, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
It feels so good. And we don't, especially professional musicians, we don't do it enough. It's like we grew up playing around campfires when we were younger, but then, if you play outside, it's at a big festival or something. But there's something so special about being in the weeds and hearing the birds react to your music. And then having that be with a woman, it's just like a beautiful kinship and a beautiful way to share friendship through music. That, not that I don't have, these deep connections with the men that I perform with, but it is really special. And maybe part of it too is that in my musical career, I really haven't been able to play with that many women.
Mm-hmm.
The sad thing is, I think that, women are encouraged to be singers, for example, but I don't feel like we're encouraged enough to be instrumentalists, to be the player in the band or the drummer. And because of that, at my age, like there just haven't been enough opportunities, I feel like, to perform with other female musicians. And I hope that we're changing that. I hope that by putting a video out there with, for example, my friend Emily Gimbel, who she's on one of these From Texas with Love, episodes, and she's an incredible pianist in addition to a great singer. I hope that these videos can reach younger women and girls and inspire them to, pursue their dreams with music in ways other than like the typical, front person of a band singer.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I would love to see.
Well, and just to sort of button up that thought, I remember hearing you talk about on Brené's podcast, the fact that you never saw yourself as a singer. You didn't start out wanting to be a singer. That just sort of evolved. How many different instruments do you play?
Well, the only one I play decently is I started playing the violin when I was 5. And that was my dream since I was 5 years old, was to be a violinist. My mother took me to see Itzhak Perlman at that time when I was in kindergarten. And ever since seeing him perform, that's what I wanted to do with my life. It just spoke to me. And I went to college for violin performance. I remember taking a voice class. It's called Voice for Non-Vocalists, something like that. And I thought it would be an easy A, and I made a C on the midterm. I was terrible because I was so just inexperienced and nervous about singing in front of people that I remember the midterm, I went into class and I forgot all of the lyrics to my song. Like just my mind went blank. It was one of those that seems like a nightmare, but it's actually real. I had
Mhm.
that experience. So it's hard to believe that I ended up being a singer after that. But it
Baptism by fires is what they call it, I think.
so crazy. But yeah, I mean, my first real working paying gig after music school was with a singer-songwriter named Chip Taylor. And he's the man responsible for writing Wild Thing, Angel of the Morning. He's an incredible songwriter. And
What an
he,
opportunity.
it was, I mean, looking back, I can't believe that I just happened to meet him at the age that I was,
Mhm.
because I think if I had not, I probably wouldn't have found singing necessarily. He encouraged me to sing harmony vocals with him. And then a few weeks into our first tour together, he said, Carrie, you're going to sing a duet with me in the middle of the show, and it's going to bring the house down. You just see. So he would like lower the mic down to my height, and I'd come join him in the middle of the stage, and I would very shyly sing this duet with him, and people loved it. And 6 weeks later, we're making a duet record, and the rest is history.
The rest is history. You're so incredibly talented, and I unfortunately would love to talk to you for so much more, but we're running out of time. So I just want to tell you thank you again for putting your music out there in so many different ways to reach so many different people. Congratulations on Americano. I mean, that's just what an incredible honor that is.
It really is an honor for me, and I am so excited for the opening in New York City.
Me too. I'm excited for you. Hopefully I'll see you there. I want to let people know that they can find out everything they need to know about you by going to our website. It's thewomenseye.com. And Carrie, always a pleasure catching up with you and getting to hear about all your many projects. Congratulations. You are so, again, just incredibly talented. And I just wish you continued success.
Thank you, Catherine. Thanks so much for having me.
You bet. And I want to remind you at home that we have two books that we produce here at the Women's Eye. The first is called 20 Women Changemakers, and here it is. You can shop for it wherever you buy books and at changemakers.com. And our newest book, 20 Women Storytellers, it's out right now, and you can find out more about that. Here it is at womenstorytellersbook.com. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Women's Eye podcast. Thanks again to my guest, Carrie Rodriguez, and thank you so much for joining me. I'm Catherine Anaya. Until next time, remember, it's the world as we see it.